There's a reason the most intelligent person in any room is almost never the loudest one. And it's not because they have nothing to say, it's because they understand something about the mind that most people will never figure out. But there's something else, something underneath the surface of what we call intelligence that nobody really talks about. We grow up believing intelligence is about knowing more, saying more, being faster, sharper, louder. The kid with the answer first, the colleague who dominates every meeting, the friend who always has a take. But Carl Jung saw it differently. He said the most developed minds are not the ones that produce the most, they're the ones that can hold the most. Hold uncertainty, hold silence, hold the discomfort of not knowing without rushing to fill it. And that changes the definition entirely. Because intelligence isn't what you do, a lot of times it's what you don't do. The habits that quietly separate a deeply intelligent mind from an average one aren't flashy, they're almost invisible, and most people walk right past them without a second thought. If you've ever felt like you operate differently from the people around you, like you see things coming before they happen, like you feel things more deeply than you can explain, drop one word in the comments that describes your mind right now. I read every one. But the most dangerous habit, that's actually the one nobody notices.
Number 1. They never react before they understand. There's a certain kind of person who hears something and immediately responds. A comment, a criticism, a provocation, and within seconds the words are already out. Most people do this, not because they're careless, but because their nervous system treats every stimulus like a threat. Something happens, the brain fires, the mouth moves. No gap, no pause, just impulse, reaction, impulse, reaction. Daniel Kahneman called this System 1 thinking, fast, automatic, emotional. It kept our ancestors alive when a sound in the bushes could mean a predator, but in a modern world, it mostly means you react to a text message the same way you'd react to a snake. Highly intelligent people don't do this. Not because they're slow, but because somewhere along the way, their mind built a filter, a fraction of a second where the impulse hits, and instead of launching outward, it turns inward. They ask, what is actually happening here? What does this person really mean? Is this about them, or is this about me? That pause, that invisible half second, is the difference between someone who reacts to life and someone who reads it. And the cost of not having it, over time, that reactivity becomes your identity. You become the person who always has a response, but never has understanding. Not because you don't care, but because you never gave yourself the space to.
Number 2. They never confuse busyness with productivity. Here's something uncomfortable. Most of what people call being productive is just organized distraction. Answering emails, checking notifications, reorganizing a to-do list, responding to things that feel urgent but mean nothing, moving constantly but never actually moving forward. Alfred Adler understood this. He said the drive for significance, the need to feel important, to feel like you're doing something, is one of the deepest forces in human psychology. And when that drive isn't guided by purpose, it doesn't produce achievement, it produces noise. Highly intelligent people see through this. They're not impressed by hustle for the sake of hustle. They don't measure a day by how many tasks they crossed off. They measure it by whether they moved closer to something that actually matters. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because the rest of the world will call you lazy. They'll see you sitting still and assume you're doing nothing. They don't see the architecture happening inside your mind, the planning, the filtering, the deliberate removal of everything unnecessary. A mind that doesn't know what matters will fill itself with everything. A mind that does will protect its emptiness. But there's also something else here, something even quieter.
Number 3. They never argue to win. You know that feeling when someone says something obviously wrong and every cell in your body wants to correct them. Most people can't resist it. The debate becomes a performance. The louder voice wins, the faster comeback gets the laugh. And at the end, both people walk away exactly where they started, just more exhausted. Carl Rogers spent his career studying this. He found that the deepest human need isn't to be right, it's to be heard. And the irony is that the people who argue the hardest are usually the ones who feel the least heard. Highly intelligent people don't argue to win. Not because they don't have the capacity, but because they've learned something most people haven't. Winning an argument and changing someone's mind are completely different things, and they'd rather have the second one. They ask questions instead of making statements. They listen for what's underneath the disagreement. They understand that most conflicts aren't about facts, they're about fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of losing face, fear of the ground shifting beneath you. And you can't fight fear with logic. You can only meet it with presence. So they step back. Not weakness, not surrender, just the quiet recognition that the person across from you is not an opponent. They're a person carrying something they haven't figured out how to put down yet. If this resonated with you, if you've ever walked away from a fight, not because you lost, but because you saw something the other person couldn't, consider subscribing. This channel exists for people like you.
Number 4. They never seek validation from people who don't understand them. This one is the quietest and the heaviest. There's a certain kind of person who spends years, sometimes decades, trying to be seen by people who were never looking, explaining themselves to family members who will never understand, proving their worth to friends who were never measuring, waiting for approval from someone who was never qualified to give it. Viktor Frankl wrote about this from the deepest possible place. In a concentration camp, stripped of every external identity, his profession, his family, his freedom, he discovered something that couldn't be taken, the ability to choose his own meaning, to decide for himself what his life was about, regardless of what anyone else believed. Most people live the opposite. They hand the pen to someone else and hope they write something kind. They build their self-worth on the shaky ground of other people's opinions, people who have their own confusion, their own insecurity, their own incomplete picture. Highly intelligent people stop doing this, not because they're arrogant, not because they don't care, but because they've realized something devastating and freeing at the same time. You cannot be understood by someone who hasn't done the work to understand themselves. And so they stop explaining, not out of resentment, but out of respect for their own inner life and for the limits of the people around them. Over time, that letting go becomes the most powerful thing they've ever done.
Number 5. They never mistake comfort for safety. The strongest insight. And this is where it all comes together. The deepest one, the one that explains the others. Most people chase comfort, a predictable routine, the same conversations, the same circle, the same version of themselves day after day. And they call it stability, they call it safety. But Jordan Peterson describes this differently. He says if you're not confronting what frightens you, you're shrinking. Not all at once, slowly. The way a room gets smaller when you stop leaving it. The walls don't move, you do. Abraham Maslow saw the same pattern. He found that the need for safety and the need for growth are always in tension, and most people choose safety every single time, not because they're weak, but because growth is uncomfortable, and comfort feels like proof that everything is fine. Highly intelligent people never make this trade. They understand something most people miss entirely. Comfort is not the same as safety. Comfort is the absence of challenge. Safety is the presence of strength, and strength only grows when it's tested. So they choose the harder conversation, the unfamiliar path, the question that might not have an answer. Not because they enjoy pain, not because they're fearless, but because they've learned that the mind, like a muscle, either expands or contracts. There is no maintenance mode. And this ties everything together. They don't react without understanding because comfort would let them. They don't confuse busyness with purpose because comfort would prefer the treadmill. They don't argue to win because comfort wants the ego fed. They don't seek validation from people who don't see them because comfort would rather be misunderstood than alone. But there's a quiet cost to all of this that doesn't get talked about enough.
When you stop doing what everyone else does, you stop belonging to everyone else. Not because you're better, but because you're no longer shaped by the same forces. And that freedom, that real freedom, is the loneliest thing you'll ever feel. Until it isn't.
The hidden strength is awareness. The quiet cost is separation. Intelligence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It moves through the worlds like water, quiet, deliberate, impossible to hold but impossible to stop.